This is a self-defeating behavior, typically of somebody who's desperate. Instead of outcompeting the Chinese, coming up with a plan to try at least to do that, you are, lifting up the barriers. They tell themselves in Washington that they're isolating the Chinese. They're not. They're isolating themselves.
All right, here I am with Richard Wolff. Richard, it's great to have you on the program. Thank you for making the time.
My pleasure. Thank you.
So I want to start with a big question. I'll leave it open-ended, go whichever direction you want, and then I'm just going to pull on some threads and we'll take it from there. Okay. But a popular speculation on my channel is people love to speculate about the outcome of U.S.-China competitiveness. You do a lot of this in your writing and your work, so we'll start with that. What would you like to share your thoughts on that subject?
Okay, I should begin with a caveat. I don't really much believe in predicting the future. I understand it's an amusement. You go to the amusement park and there's an interesting person and you give them a couple of bucks and they tell you what your future will be and you enjoy it and you have a good laugh. If you start agonizing over what they just told you, then you've misunderstood an entertainment for an actual capability. Nobody can predict the future. I can't either. What I can do and what substitutes for that, and I want to put it on the table, is I can tell you where things are going, and on the assumption, and that's all it is, that they will continue in the future sort of more or less like they've been doing in the past, well then, I can then tell you what will happen. Over the last 30 to 40 years, we have been witnessing, those of us willing to look at it, we've been witnessing an absolutely unique phenomena. The People's Republic of China, whatever you think about it, and I'm not really here neither to condemn nor to endorse anything about it, but if you have eyes to see, you will see economic development achieving things nobody thought were possible. I have a PhD in economics. I got it, as it happens, from Yale University in New Haven, Connecticut. It has a big program in economic development, and I took those courses and I learned all that stuff. Nobody understood in those days what the Chinese were doing. And in those days, it was only the beginning, and you could be excused for not paying all that much attention. They were one of many very poor countries in the world who were trying to stop being poor countries in the world. Americans might have read the novel by Pearl Buck, The Good Earth. If you ever did read that book, we had to in high school. Well, you learned what the poverty was like. It was, for a suburban kid like me, it was hard to get my head around what that kind of poverty is like. In the last 30 to 40 years, the Chinese achieved a level of economic development that took several centuries in Western Europe. And it took a good century and a half, counting conservatively, here in the United States. We've never seen anything like it. What the Chinese did was to mobilize, borrow from the rest of the world, no question, but put all that together in a successful mix. If your measuring rod is economic growth, lifting people out of poverty, and let's remember, 1.4 billion people, 4 to 5 times the population of the United States. They were able to do it. Not only that, they now compete with the United States at the highest levels of technology. What we get from Intel or Apple or, any of the, they have their equivalent. And in some cases, they're already ahead of us. I'll give you an example. 10 or 15 years ago, every major car-producing company in the world undertook a program to develop the electric car, the electric vehicle, to replace the fossil fuel burning oil and gas vehicle. Okay, everybody did that. And we have many examples of that being produced. However, one example outranks everybody else. The electric cars of China are better and cheaper than anybody else's. They won the competition. That happens all the time. Just other companies in other countries at other times won equivalent competitions. The response of the United States has been to impose a tariff to make the better, cheaper electric car from China unaffordable. The current rate of tariff applied by the Biden government is 100%. So, for example, if the electric car from China costs you $30,000 that have to be sent to China to pay for the car, you've got to give them the car dealer $30,000 to pay off the Chinese, and another $30,000, 100%, goes to Uncle Sam, so that the cost to an American would be $60,000 for that $30,000 car. Okay? There are no electric cars from China on the road in the United States. A quarter of the electric cars on the road in Europe are the Chinese cars. The greatest producer, the most successful, the most rapidly growing car company in the world, most Americans have never heard of. It has 3 initials, B as in boy, Y, and D as in dog, BYD Corporation. The response of the United States is to freeze them out. This is self-defeating and, to be an economist for a moment, stupid. Why? Everywhere else in the world, as the transition to electric vehicles is underway, every competitor of the United States across all industries will be able to buy the best car at $30,000 with which to compete with the American company, whereas the American company is going to have to pay more than $30,000 for the non-tariff equivalent, which will cost you $40,000 to $50,000 for an inferior vehicle. I don't know, but when I went to school and they taught me economics, this is somewhere between self-defeating and stupid, and a little bit of both. And since I come out of the American education system, I enjoy telling people, because it gives them something to think about, that when I got my PhD in economics at Yale years ago, my classmate was a woman. There weren't very many women taking those courses then. So she, I remember her because she was unusual. Her name was Janet Yellen. Okay, she's now the Secretary of the Treasury in the United States government. I know that she knows what I just mentioned to you is the case. She knows it's self-defeating. She knows it's stupid. She's out there advocating it because that's the position of the government. The United States is losing the competition with China. I could give you many more examples if you wish. This is a self-defeating behavior, typically of somebody who's desperate. Instead of outcompeting the Chinese, coming up with a plan to try at least to do that, you are, lifting up the barriers. They tell themselves in Washington that they're isolating the Chinese. They're not. They're isolating themselves. And the rest of the world is watching in bemused. The Germans have a word for it. It's called Schadenfreude. The rest of the world looking at the United States, and they see an empire going down, and they get the pleasure that comes from that. And we ought to wake up as a nation and figure this out.